Humor, another of the soul's weapons in the fight for self-preservation. Viktor Frankl. Times are going to get tough, but how you handle it and respond for the world to see will make all the difference. It might even determine whether you're the hero or the villain in someone else's story. This goes for everyone, but men especially need to listen up. Laughter is vital for leadership, and I want to point out two examples of humorous masculinity, one that will serve you well and one that won't, beginning with Anakin Skywalker.
This is where the fun begins.
Throughout the Clone Wars animated series and the live-action Ahsoka show on Disney, Ahsoka Tano takes things a bit too seriously in comparison to her master, Anakin Skywalker. Anakin was always a prolific jokester on and off the battlefield. It's one of the best parts of him in the animated Clone Wars series. Always making light of the situation. Sometimes this drew a glare or roll of the eyes from his master, Obi-Wan Kenobi, and sometimes the two Jedi would enjoy a laugh together. In fact, Obi-Wan learned to keep up with it over the years. Ahsoka was always a bit more stern, though. It was a challenge for her. In Ahsoka, Anakin's former Padawan journeys back in time in a vision of sorts to her experience fighting in the Clone Wars alongside Anakin. She is surrounded by death and despair, and Ahsoka is sickened by it and tired. Back in the body of her 14-year-old self, Ahsoka is overcome by despair as she holds the hand of a dying clone trooper. As a Jedi, she was making decisions on the battlefield that resulted in life or death situations for these soldiers, and nothing about that was okay to her. But then there's Anakin, who is also fighting, also leading, but smiling and joking. Anakin approaches her to try and encourage Ahsoka.
This isn't what I trained for.
I have to teach you to be a soldier.
Is that all I'll have to teach my own Padawan one day?
And Anakin's jokes begin.
You know, teaching's not all it's cracked up to be.
What makes you say that?
I'm joking.
You're joking. How can you joke at a time like this?
How dare you, Anakin?
How dare you?
Anakin looks at her, knowing that she is just a child in an ugly situation. Humor has a special kind of power. When we're with people we love and trust, it's often easier to conjure up, but even with strangers in a grim situation, we often see solidarity expressed through jokes. You know, some of my fondest memories are the Boy Scout trips that went the most horribly wrong, suffering in the cold and the wet with my closest friends, and then when I was in college and played in rock bands, the thing that I think about the most is the horrible hotels and when the tour van would break down, or when I busted a string on stage. And it's not nostalgia, it was actually funny at the time because I was with people who thought it was funny and knew how to laugh about it. There's a book that comes to mind for this, Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning, written about his time languishing in the Nazi death camps of the Holocaust. Frankl describes a pact between a few friends of his within Auschwitz that they would invent at least one amusing story every day about their future lives when they survive. These people laughed together in the shadow of a chimney billowing out ashes of human remains, about how their future selves would behave during dinner at the sight of warm soup. It is well known that humor, more than anything else in the human makeup, can afford an aloofness and an ability to rise above any situation, even if only for a few seconds. No one in Frankl's narrative is saying too soon or taking offense at humor amidst bad circumstances. This is the Holocaust we're talking about. And the man who can help the people looking up to him to laugh when things are at their worst, that person has the unique ability to lead others. Frankl says, the attempt to develop a sense of humor and to see things in a humorous light is some kind of trick learned while mastering the art of living. Yet it is possible to practice the art of living even in a concentration camp, although suffering is omnipresent. There is something special about men's camaraderie and humor. It's not that women can't take a joke, it's just that it takes a certain type of girl to vibe with how men tease one another and mock the absurdity of life. Obi-Wan and Anakin have this kind of masculine friendship. There's less attention paid to one another's emotional state, because there's very little to be done about it. They're at war. The feminine virtue of care is so important in the world. I don't want to understate that, but it has a time and a place, and it's not on a mission during wartime. That's the time for humor that pushes people forward to complete what needs to be done. The problem for Anakin is that when the woman in his life who wants to tend to his emotional needs tries to help him, he hasn't learned to do that, and it's a form of masculinity gone wrong. The same is true for another great character in a totally different kind of story, Hank Schrader of Breaking Bad. This is an example of masculine humor gone wrong. Every scene of Hank and his cop partner, Steve Gomez, is these men ripping on one another, calling names and concealing things from one another in day-to-day business. Hank endured a trauma on the job, and in the office, Hank and Gomez keep the show going. This might sound familiar to some of the audience who have a friend in your life who keeps things surface level at all times. That is bromance, not friendship. When Hank is alone, even for a few moments, he is spiraling into panic attacks at the office. Similar to Anakin, he is also closed off at home from his wife, Marie, who is desperate to get through to him and offer some care. Humor, when it runs too close to sarcasm, has the potential to do harm. It's counterproductive. Sarcasm is when you say things that are untrue, often by using words that convey the opposite.
Good job.
But humor that conveys a truth about the tough parts of living, that can actually lift people up. When Anakin jokes that being a master isn't all it's cracked up to be, he's not attacking Ahsoka. Only an insecure teenager would take it that way. He's saying that responsibility is a huge burden and a challenge. This is true. It's also true that Anakin wouldn't give it up for anything. He loves to lead others, and he accepts the consequences of leadership, like that of leading men into battle. One book recommendation for you, in addition to Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning, which tackles this topic, is The 4 Loves by C.S. Lewis. This book explores 4 ways in which people can love one another. There's affection, friendship, romantic love, and charity. And friendship covers humor and laughter in great detail in a way that is really relevant to forming healthy male friendships in adulthood. Really recommend you check this book out. So like Viktor Frankl said, humor is one of the soul's weapons in the fight for self-preservation. Use it well. Thanks for watching Geeky Stoics.